Right, we now go to local board input, and we do have, before we go to that, I just say that there was another request for public input in relation to item number 12, that is the revocation of reserve status and disposal, but unfortunately we had to decline that request because at this stage we have not made any decision as to the future of the particular piece of land, so it's premature to be talking about disposal of the land until we've made a decision. So that it was declined. So the local input, I take it we've got Hibiscus Bay's chair, Julia Parfitt, here is here in relation to the first item, coastal management strategy. So, Matt, do you want to talk to us now about that? And then we have also Dr. Grant Gillen from the Devonport Takapuna Local Board, and he said he'll wait till his item comes up, which is that item number 12.
He's a very patient man, obviously.
So
right.
You can talk to your item, and then we'll move to the item after that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as all of you will be aware, that our local board has had an issue, a coastal issue, that we're dealing with currently, and that's the erosion on Orewa Beach. So we'd just like to have some very brief input into the strategy, and we'd like to say we totally support the strategy. We like the fact that it allows for prioritisation, which is going to be a key. We know that our whole coastline, which is very varied with 2 major harbours, well actually 3. Yes, 3, before I'm corrected. Major harbours traversing our region. It's going to be really important that Council, over the next particularly 50-year time frame, gets their heads around that one. We'd like to see more allocation of funding, and that's going to be part of our annual plan request. We would also like to say we really like this aspect, and this is something that's being built into the design for Orewa Beach, which has actually received some accolades from the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, for the fact that throughout Orewa Beach there's going to be different solutions for different parts of the beach, and also the element that there's a lot of future-proofing there in the terms of the design. It's not an easy process, however, going through something like Orewa Beach. You have many vested interests, as I've found out and discovered. Today we have our 3rd public meeting with, we started off with immediate stakeholders, residents, and we've had 2 so far very well attended meetings, and I expect a 3rd. You have some misleading statements made. We had the local press coming out with supposedly a representation visually with people holding hands of what encroachment might occur, and as at this point anyway we don't have a fixed position. But our board would like you to know that we believe that this should be a region-wide responsibility, because it's very much a regional issue, and it becomes very difficult just in terms of staffing in our own local board area to be able to run the type of public engagement sessions that people today demand and expect. So we're very pleased that this is top of your agenda, and we'd like you to really ensure that there's sufficient funding to really look at those high strategic areas, and particularly that prioritisation process should look at the assets in the beach, the usage of the beach, or the coastal area that's involved. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I said it would be short and sweet, and we'd just like to say we acknowledge what you're doing and we totally support it.
Just before you depart, or just before you go back to seat, I'll just see that Councillor Watson's got a question.
Yeah, thanks. Just in terms of that region-wide strategy and the prioritisation that arises out of it, perhaps you could just make a comment in terms of what work's already been done. It's not as if in a number of instances, and certainly the one you're familiar with, where we're starting from ground zero. There has in that instance where been huge amount of money invested over quite some considerable period of time. So we're already off to a bit of a flying start in some of these instances, aren't we?
Oh, I think particularly with Orewa Beach, I was speaking to a coastal engineer who said it's the most researched beach in the Auckland region, and unfortunately some of the solutions in the past haven't always been the right solutions. As you know, Councillor Watson, the 1950s experiment by the Navy to actually charge the estuary actually caused and created many of these issues, plus coastal settlement and the removal of dunes. They've all had a part. It's a heavily modified beach, but we believe that we've really got the right strategy going forward now.
Thank you. Councillor Quacks.
Yeah, perhaps not so much a question, but as a comment around erosion. And I think it's important that we don't confuse sea level rises with erosion. They're two totally different things. And it doesn't mean to say just because it's low-lying that it's subject to erosion. If it's not low-lying, it may not be subject to erosion. I think we need to get that clear. And, you know, in the Bucklands Beach area, for example, there's been widespread erosion around that area, including the cliff that fell down and took away with it part of the former mayor's house along Clove Valley Road. And, you know, those cliffs are high cliffs, but they're still subject to erosion. So it's just not low-lying land that's subject to erosion.
No, well, I think that's reinforcing your position, Councillor Quacks.
He should be in Paris.
And it's
Someone's got to
good
run
know
the city.
That keeps that uppermost in our minds as well. Thank you.
Oh,
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Sorry, just a side comment to the acting mayor at the moment. I think for me, I mean, a big part of my ward is a coastline, but also two coastlines. And I think having the compartment management plans is going to be a good way of dealing with it, though it's going to be quite a process because we have so many communities involved. And I guess that's going to be the issue, is we're talking about a regional coastal plan, but there are going to be very big variations upon how different communities want their coastline treated. So that's going to we're going to have really sensitive management of how that happens. We're having the same issue with seawall falling down and undermining probably the only reserve in Huia at the moment. So I think that is an issue. I live on a cliff myself. It's all starting to fall away up in West Harbour. So, you know, there's a lot of issues we've got to face, and I think if council do what they can do, there's going to be other things that just, there's nothing we can do, and we're going, I think as a coastal city, we're going to have to accept that there is parts of the area that will be uninhabitable, unfortunately. But anyway, this should go some way.
That's absolutely acknowledged
I think
by
the
our
question-
local board.
Turn that into a question.
No, I
Are
can't,
you-
I'm sorry, I
is-
wasn't,
Sorry. I'm sorry.
So I'm never quite sure, Mr Chairman. Sometimes we have statements, sometimes I didn't think that Mrs Parfitt is not the writer of the
No,
the
we
report
haven't
that
got
I could
the
ask her a
report. We
question.
haven't got the report.
It's up there. Okay.
Okay, but
Well,
I
I'll
think-
move the report
well,
then,
well,
so we can
you
talk
could
about
ask Councillor Parfitt, is she available to go to other areas of Auckland once you've done Orewa?
And you can
Well,
lead the way, Matt.
I've certainly learnt a lot about engagement and consultation, which I'd love to share with anybody.
That's important. It is
course.
important,
Yep,
so
it is
you can
important.
share it.
I think the whole idea is that you're as open as you possibly can be.
Gotta tell the
Councillor
truth.
Penrose.
Yeah, it's the comment, thanks, Chair, and Councillor Quacks actually made a comment in regards to the difference between the sea level rise now and of course the more regular storms that we're having. And I totally agree with you, Julia, that it should be a region-wide approach because, you know, right across our coastline, right across the region, we're all suffering it. And I know there's some huge work going underway up the south in particular. As we go forward, but so early next year, Mr Chair, is going to be a challenging year for us as we make some hard calls, because last night, at the residents' meeting last night, whilst it's contrary to this particular item, it was around grade separation. You know, we've got nothing in there for grade separation,
Right, well,
which
we
is
can't get onto that one.
But what I'm saying, Mr Chair, is, you know, it's going to be an interesting year next year, but we need, I think, 20 million, wasn't it, Julia, for your 20+ million for your seawall rebuild, isn't it?
At this stage, we're doing it in stages, so it's about
Overall, 20+ million?
through the fullness of time, but I think it's, at this stage, we're looking at a quarter of that figure, if not a fifth.
For now.
Now,
Thank you. Mr Wilcox, and then and then Councillor Cash.
I suppose I just want to know
Moved it.
what happened to the reef idea.
We've got it sitting up.
There was a group that, under the Rodney District Council, had some funding to do some preliminary work to look at a reef option, an artificial reef. At the moment, I understand their position is stalled because they don't have sufficient funding to go through with the resource consent, and of course they would need to raise the funding. But our senior coastal engineer from Tonkin Taylor that is handling this application on behalf of council has actually made the point that while it might address some of the issues of Orewa Beach, it's not a silver bullet, and it won't actually in any significant way affect what's happening there in terms of erosion.
Thank you. And Councillor Cashmore.
Yes, thanks. Julia, being also an area that has a large amount of erosion as well, and I think the Franklin Local Board is also supportive of regionalisation of this coastal erosion management. What's your budget for that, and would you sort of be advocating your budget gets rolled back into the regional program?
Already that decision's been made. I think all but the Ōrākei Local Board agreed to pool their budget to actually help with addressing these issues. So that's already, to my knowledge, or maybe Dean has an update there, that we do have a pooled fund in which to draw from. Of course, it's not enough to actually address all issues. That's why your prioritisations are key.
Thank you. And Councillor Webster.
Oh, just very quickly, Julia, look, I do that, I do a slot on Monday mornings on Times FM. So I actually mentioned it the first week that you were doing it, but if you keep me informed, I can sort of mention it on Monday.
Oh, thank you very much. We've got, as I said, this afternoon we have a consultation, but we're planning one to actually address the issues, because there's different solutions, showing people on the beach exactly what the profiles would look like for each of the solutions. Because I think that visualising something is far better. And because it actually includes a walkway as well, there's a little bit of concern there as to exactly what's happening. So I think it's really important to get the message out.
So
Thank
just
you.
drop me a line and
I certainly will.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll move that we thank Mrs Parfitt for coming over. Move that.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Webster. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Well, you've done a very good job. Thank you, Julia.
Oh, well, thank you.
And you may just take a seat at the table there if you want while the items are dealt with. It'll be pretty quick, though. It'll be a pretty quick item now that you've led the way on it. So
Oh,
we'll
thank
now
you.
we'll now get the officers come up to the table. We've got Sarah Sinclair, Paul Clonick and Natasha Carpenter. They're the writers of the report, and the full strategy was emailed to you people, to the members of the committee. But I think, thank you, and the PowerPoint presentation, so now we're in your hands. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the stated support. So to introduce us three, I'm Sarah Sinclair, your Chief Engineer. Paul Kleinack is the Manager of Coastal Services, and Dr Natasha Carpenter is our Senior Coastal Engineer. As part of this team, we also had AT and Parnuku and John Moore, our Chief Sustainability Officer, but I'm afraid they're all apologies for this morning. So this is the context of what we're reporting today is that Council was asked to consider issues and in fact the governing body, specifically in relation to Orewa, asked us to look at a wider erosion, sea level rise and inundation study, brought back initially in August this year. At this stage, I must point out that the title of the document appended to your brief today must change. It's a plan for how we develop a regional approach to erosion, sea level rise and inundation. We called it a strategy because it's a strategic approach, but it's not a strategy in the context of council's strategic plans, which follow a legislative process. So we are going to retitle it, and it's not a formal strategy. So please bear that in mind.